Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to these Africa Brand Summit monthly webinars. My name is Victor Sibeko. I will be your host, and I'm also a convener of this wonderful initiative to discuss things that have to do with shaping our continent, not only our country as South Africa. We are part of the bigger family, which is the continent. There is no way we can speak about South Africa and not speak about the continent. Just to bring you up to speed, Africa Brand Summit was established about 4 or 5 years ago, but 4 years running full steam. What we do, we run monthly webinars on very topical issues. And these issues included the very topic that we're having today, talking about business, the role of business in shaping perceptions around Africa, because we know, most of us know that Africa is looked upon or looked at as one of those dark continents where when you visit some of the countries overseas, you get asked a very silly question as to do you walk with the monkeys and the elephants on the streets? And some people even want to touch your skin. So we are a very well-developed country and a continent that is doing very well, that has been affected by many other things like politics and economy and etc. But for the purpose of this topic and Africa Brand Summit in particular, the reason why we started this initiative, it was started by Mr. Soli Mueng, who is the founder of Africa Brand Summit 4 years ago, ideally to discuss things that really need to be interrogated. Now, we took up a stance and a theme that says we don't leave any stone unturned. We call a spade, not a big spoon for turning the soil upside down. Now, with our discussions and our topics, they are very robust. Sometimes they do rub other people the wrong way, especially the officials in our government, including our very brand agency that is responsible for Brand South Africa. But because we're not only talking about South Africa, that does not worry us in any way. We go ahead and discuss the things that needs to be discussed. Now, it will be quite interesting for you to also note that these discussions are not just talk shops. We are totally against talk shops. The topics that are discussed here, there are many other things that develop from these topics. We then initiate various programs to address these issues and work along very strategic NGOs, NPOs. But the beauty about the outcome of these discussions is that they all culminate into an annual Africa Brand Summit, which we hold annually. And this becomes a week-long activity where on a Monday, it's the registration and a thermal tour for the media. On a Tuesday, we do master classes. On a Wednesday, we then attend or visit very strategic establishments within the country that is hosting the summit. Then on a Thursday and Friday, we hold the actual summit. During that summit, we have dinner, and this dinner, we then run an awards program, and the awards program is referred to as the influencer of influencers. We look at the people that are doing good. It doesn't have to be a politician or a socialite or a celebrity, but we look at people that are really touching the lives of the people within their countries, within the communities as well. So for this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, quite exciting topic that has been brought about by a number of things that are happening in our various countries as well as politics. I'm delighted to welcome guests from as far as Kenya, Botswana, Eswatini, Zimbabwe, Lusaka, in Zambia, as well as Nigeria. So it is indeed a very noble call to have such a participation. Now, one of our keynote speaker, who happens to be a partner of the Africa Brand Summit, was meant to be the one and only Professor Lumumba, PLO Lumumba, who is a lawyer by profession. Currently, he is traveling between Kenya and Tanzania. He's unable to join us in person, but he says if you can find a spot where he can stop, and he will be able to join us. But to kickstart this conversation, there's something that I would like to share, just to pick your brains. But before we start, so far I'm very delighted that most of you know the rules of the house. Please keep your microphone muted. When we get to question and answers time, unmute. You can raise your hand. I'll try and find your hand. If I cannot find your hand, do ask to be attended to. I will really do the honors and take your questions. So we will run through the program. We will have various speakers. I will introduce them as and when they come on board, and then thereafter we will engage you as participants, and we'll also like to know from you as to what exactly you would like to see going forward. But for this moment, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to share this as something that I would like to pick your brain with. It's an extract from Professor Lumumba himself, when he talks about Africa and the role we play, and what is it that we do, and how can we better manage ourselves in the space of making Africa earn the respect that it deserves. Okay, take a listen. Can you hear the audio?
No, we cannot hear.
Can you hear the audio?
No.
No, sorry, sorry, I need to switch on the audio. I'm multitasking here, running like a producer and a host at the same time. I need to share.
They'll never tell.
Okay, there we go.
Bill Gates come and meet your president. You'll see Tony Blair come and meet your president. You'll see Macron come and meet your president. You'll see all of them. And then they will never admit, but they'll be told, if you want money in agriculture, behave this way. If you want money in this area, behave this way. They will never tell that to the Chinese. They will never tell that to the Indians. They will never tell that to the Vietnamese. They will never tell that to the Koreans. But in Africa, they tell us. That is why, as I speak to you now, under this new scramble, the IMF and the World Bank are back, telling you who to hire in your universities, what to sell and what not to sell. It is a sad situation. So today, as I look at Africa in that new scramble, the Chinese are here, the Turks are here, the British are here, the French are here, Qataris are here, the Americans are here. This time round, they are so subtle that we don't even recognize them, but they control us. What are we going to do about it? In order to develop, we must do something. It has also been demonstrated that it can be done. I've traveled across this continent and I've seen that development is possible. You go to London now. They are demonstrating that it can be done. Go to Kigali now. See what they are doing in the health sector in their own small way. See how they are collaborating in the area of mobile telephony in their own small way. It can be done. I've been to Botswana and I've seen what they are doing in their own small way. I've been to Mauritius, see what they are doing in their own small way. And they do not have the resources that other countries have. And I'm giving this example to say that indeed it can be done, and it can be done within the continent of Africa. So what we must do is to begin to pull together. We have 55 telephone access codes. Nigeria 234, Ghana 233, Kenya 254, Tanzania 255, Uganda 256, Gambia 260, Zimbabwe 263. How can we, in this day and age, you cross into Benin, you cross into Togo, you cross into Guinea-Bissau, You have a different internet connectivity. Why can't Africa have a single satellite and a single telephone code so that when I travel from Mogadishu in Somalia to Dhaka in Senegal, like the Chinese do, like the Americans do, like the Indians do, we can have the same, because communication is critical to development. And I'm saying this, part of my agenda is pick your conscience with live examples that you may go out there irritated, but irritated to do the right thing. And I'm suggesting that indeed, when we talk about development, this is what we must do. Is Africa conscious of our state? Yes, Africa is conscious. This is what makes me happy. That after all these analyses, it appears to me that Africans have now recognized that going forward, we can only defeat the conspiracies, we can only have development as we are talking about it by working as a team. It is only through industrialization that we are going to be manufacturers in all sectors. Make unity attractive. Because if you don't make it attractive, we will separate, and that will make us weaker. You are here, maximum 40 years, you will have gone upstairs. But after 40 years, in which kind of country will you want your children to be? This is the question. It is not about you and me. It is about them. This is intergenerational. Africa must change. Africa can change. And it can only change if we change our minds. And our minds we must change.
There you have it, folks. A very interesting insight by Prof, who's talking about Africa as a segregated continent, but we all strive to achieve one good thing to make our countries functional. But we seem to be challenged by a situation where it's the international communities that we have to come in and influence our thinking. And our dependency on international communities to come and plug or plow money into the continent that is so rich. Now, the question is, from what Professor is saying, most of this success are brought about by effective business. And certainly effective business go along with effective business leadership. Now, one of our questions that we have today that we need to address is, why can't governments run successful countries based on a business model that will make us respectable by or respected by all other countries? We have with us a business strategist, a turnaround strategist, and a consultant who's going to talk to us about what exactly makes business function well, irrespective of its location, whether it's in South Africa or it's in Ghana or it's in Mali or in Kenya. We know that the basics in running a successful business are based on good governance, performance management, good financial controls, as well as good audits. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Dube to give us his insights on what is it that businesses are doing right and that government is unable to do? How do we get this right, Bab Dube?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Sibeko. Maybe let's start by spelling out the differences between the corporate environment and the government environment. The government environments by nature should provide an enablement platform in the form of legislature, in the form of infrastructure and its policies. On the other hand, the corporate environment have a profit motive scenario where they run businesses on a profit motive basis. That is, they would like to have a profit in terms of them addressing the contributors of that equity into that business. Whilst on the other hand, governments do not have a profit motive situation. They get provided with the finances, with the resources by the taxes that the governments collect from the electorate, from the businesses that operate on its territories. And then they would address issues of the obligatory infrastructure and all the other provisions that a typical government needs to provide for its people. So that's the disparity between a corporate environment and a government environment. Now, you asked me as to why there's this difference between these two structures. Corporate environment excels or depends on the expertise of its human capital. You allocate and you instruct your human capital to perform certain duties, and we refer to that as functionality. Typical company would have a number of functions: HR, finance, distribution, and so on. Whilst the government, what we see happening is that in most cases, skill fall on the back, on the sides when it comes to government, due to the dynamism that involves governments, your politics, and other things that overrule the way to run things in government. So that's the two poles. Corporate run things professionally and with the typical skills that they need, whilst on the other hand, government would not recognize skill in most cases. That is what comes up with the downfall of many governments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dube. May I ask you to please hold your thought right there, because we will be talking about this profit and non-profit. So we are paying taxes and government is getting money and we expect delivery, and the government's return on investment should be seen by the happy people getting the services. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to inform you that the professor is managed to join us, and certainly he will have very limited time. May I ask Professor P.L.O. Lumumba to greet the nation. Mr. Professor Lumumba is the son of the soil. He's one of those people that I would normally say he needs no introduction. Prof, we really appreciate your time. We know you're traveling. It's not easy for you to squeeze in, but you're always available as a very important and a key stakeholder and a partner of the Africa Brand Summit. Welcome. Karibu sana. Okay, we might have dropped the professor. We're so excited. The professor joined us. He joined us right just now, and yeah, we may have lost him again. Okay. All right, we may have lost him again. Okay, let's get back to our topic. Mr. Dube, I hear what you say, and I'll allow other members to also I'll allow other members of the panel to also weigh in this topic. But before we bring in a very key area that you've just mentioned, that the reason why businesses function optimally and professionally so and effective is because they have the functions clearly lined up with roles and responsibilities. And these roles and responsibilities will lie with HR, then there's somebody responsible for finance, somebody responsible for other departments. But in this instance, before I allow you to carry on, because I would like us to have a conversation after which we will open up for to the members, our guests, to also weigh in. We have with us Dr. Faith Tuelo, who is a specialist in human resources development, who works for one of the very key organizations in Botswana. Dr. Faith, human resources is known as one of the best disciplines within an organization. And Botswana is also known as one of the best performing countries within SADC, if not within Africa on its own. What is it that we need to get right in terms of human resources development? And when you look at corporate and government, what are the challenges, or what are your quick wins that you are able to achieve in Botswana? Madam Faith?
Yes.
Probably still trying to find the unmute button. And Ms. Duelo? Okay. See, I have to act like a radio producer here. I produce and I facilitate and moderate at the same time. Okay, while we're waiting for Madam Duelo and Dr. Dube, maybe I should just jump straight to Ketsi, Miss Oki, Miss Kiseho Oki. Miss Kiseho Oki, ladies and gentlemen, is a media specialist. She's worked in the media, both radio and television. And then she then joined the mining industry, which is one of the key performing industries that make Botswana known and respected for what it is. It's diamonds and beef in Botswana. So I would like to find out from Me Okihore, what is the correlation between the African countries doing business and government? Because you've had your fair share in serving in the highest office in Botswana. Over to you, Me.
Okay, I was on mute.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Vic. I hope that I'm audible to everybody.
Yep.
Can you confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can confirm.
Hello, Vic.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, ma'am. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Vic?
Yes, we can hear you, Meoki. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Firstly, let me take this opportunity to greet everybody from Botswana here in Southern Africa. As has already been
I think the camera is taking a bit of your bandwidth. Try and just address us without the picture on. We would have loved to see you, but we've seen you.
perfect. I think that's what's actually now affecting the network. So yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to greet everybody who's on the call, including all the speakers. I think that this topic is very important, and I absolutely agree with the previous speaker in his submissions. And I think that, you know, from my observation, one of the main impediments to productivity within perhaps the government establishment, that obviously, as we know, generally governments are very broad, you know, they're very huge with a huge workforce and different you know, professions inside there. But for me, one of the most things that I would say, you know, hampers productivity and delivery, I think is one, it is definitely the red tapes that are there within the government institution. That really stifles creativity and delivery, because you get a lot of people having great innovative ideas of how to execute certain, you know, deliverables. But regrettably, because of the very long hierarchy within government that has to be adhered to from a protocol perspective, it's not as quick as it is in the private sector for one to actually get their idea through, or to even get it executed optimally. And then I think another issue for me definitely has got to be the issue of separation of powers. I think is key. We know that most governments, you know, when we have ministers who happen to be of a political party that would have won elections, and now these ministers are the ones who are actually heading the different government ministries. And however, on the flip side of the coin, what we have is technocrats who are typically the ones running from a knowledge and expertise point of view. They are the ones who are running, you know, government, but they are, however, obviously expected, because of protocol, they are expected to be reporting to these ministers who, as I said earlier on, would be there by virtue of their positions within the political office. So I think it really hampers, delivery and, innovation. It's not all the time, but I think most of the time, then you find that it's not easy to get that correlation between, the political office or the political party that is leading that government and the technocrat on the other side. So I don't know if I've answered the question, Vic. I had a bit of a network.
Yes, ma'am, you have articulated it very well. And before I go over to the next panelist, I would like to go back to Mr. Dube. Mr. Dube, I hear you, and I think all other members here hear you say the difference here is that business is business, it's profit driven, and government is government. It's supposed to be driven by delivery, service delivery. Now, Oki says, what is important here is to have structures within an organization, and those structures are led by ministers, and these ministers have to clearly understand the separation of powers. Now, in an organization, there is a structure, Mr. Dube, and the structure is also advised by the need to have a person to fulfill a role or a portfolio of some kind. Now, in corporate, there's a recruitment and everything else. What do you think could be the problem in government? Is it only political deployment? Why don't we have the structures that are filled by capable people with expertise? Babdube.
Got it. Look, typically what we see in governments, through all the three phases of government, for lack of better words, that's municipal, provincial, and national government. I've always argued that I think there comes a time when governments really should consider matching job specs at any level, job specs versus the curriculum vitae of each and every person that occupies a position at any level of government. We have seen numerous times over the past 30, 40, 50 years that most of these people, their CVs do not match their job specs, and that's where the problem lies. My argument here is a mayor of a town, a mayor of a municipality, which controls billions of rand. In most cases, these people don't have the basic understanding of what a balance sheet looks like or what an income statement looks like. So that's where more or less problems are coming from. People allocate expenditure, people allocate funds to infrastructure, to all the needs that a particular municipality needs, or provincial structures, and even coming from the national government. So I think that issue should be contested and should be put forward as a main reason why governments fail. Because at the end of the day, it's provision, taxation, and regulation. Provision would be, do we have adequate skills? No, in most cases. Taxation, indeed, we will have these perfect taxation arms in the government that collect tax. But then where does the money go to? Is it used for the purposes that the money was aimed at? That's another question, but we've seen the types of things that have been happening over the years. Regulation, I think this needs to be put under the microscope as well, because what we see is that there's a high degree of lawlessness, and any given country, the problem starts with lawlessness. If there's no rule of law that's exercised, we'll have problems across the board.
Yeah. Now, say, Miss Oki, I don't know what the situation in Botswana, but in South Africa, we've had instances where you have a minister that is tasked with a responsibility to look after a certain portfolio, but come elections, things changes, but the minister is still kept there. Now, from you as a public relation consultant and a specialist, and we know very well that there's things that we need to manage. We need to manage image, we need to manage the brand, we need to manage reputation. Now, what would be the case in your experience in countries like Botswana, in any other country that you can make reference to? Do you find yourself having to deal with cleaning up the mess of a minister who is incapable of delivering on the given task? Ms. Oki?
Yeah, thank you very much, Vic. Look, I mean, I think from our side, you obviously would have a minister who is also a member of parliament. So already that means they have two huge and equally important, portfolios to look after. I know that in the past, there's been instances where the constituents would be very concerned about the lack of visibility and or contribution of that parliamentarian in their constituency. Meanwhile, the rationale is that they are occupied by national duty of them now in their capacity as cabinet ministers. So it becomes very difficult. So that means obviously you can't definitely serve two masters at the same time because one is bound to suffer. And I think that in terms of public relations is a very crucial element of any conversation, especially if you're talking about organizational or country conversations. And I think one thing that people always omit from where I'm standing as a PR practitioner is that we perhaps fail to leverage as much as we should on the value that can be derived out of working with PR, practitioners, and this can be, executed through whether even, as soon as someone occupies office. In this case, we're talking political office, and even though you end up as a cabinet minister by virtue of you having won, the election, you have to instantly bring on board a team that includes a PR, function, as well as a project management function that will help you to ensure that you are kept on track of all the commitments that you would have made as you were lobbying for office. Generally in Botswana, obviously, it's after 4 years. We are actually going for our next general elections next year in 2024. And we are already asking, as the constituents, we're already asking ourselves what major or important contribution have we seen in our different constituencies done by these members of parliament that we've elected into office. And I think we oftentimes, it actually turns out that we are wondering more than they are. They are yet to wonder, they are yet to see and have a clear indication of their achievements, because oftentimes, as you say, they wake up only on the 11th hour, like maybe a month or two before the next election. And that really is where the mess is. And I think there's great opportunity, however, for that to be closed. And as I said, in terms of just coming up with solutions to say, you can't just be elected into an office and, wait until 4 years for you to come back and say again to your electorate, vote for me again, when meanwhile you haven't delivered or you've actually failed dismally. So in terms of cabinet, office here in Botswana, I think the good thing about democracy is that you get the electorate choosing at any given time who they want in office. So we've had, I remember in the last but one general election, where we had a very huge, unprecedented, huge number of parliamentarians who were members of cabinet being voted out in their constituencies. It was almost as if, the country had or connived or agreed to do that. But, then the impact means at government level, there was a huge change in terms of leadership because a lot of the ministers had actually lost in the general election. And that means they would not be appointed into cabinet positions. However, one thing that I think we still continue to see in spite of that is that some of them would be returned to office through what we call a specially elected member of parliament route. And now, as you're saying, the question is, has that person done, performed exceptionally well for them to even be brought back into office? Oftentimes, unfortunately, the answer is no. So it really creates a big problem because it contributes significantly to continuous non-delivery, which really we should nip in the bud.
Thank you so much. Let me not be selfish for a moment. We've got guests that have joined us from Durban. Hello, Rudy, Durban, Cape Town. Let me just open the floor before we carry on with this conversation. Let me just open the floor and ask the floor the very same questions as to what is the role of business really in assisting shape the perceptions that international communities may have about doing business in Africa. And we know top on the list is the whole issue around corruption. But currently we're going through stuff. I'll point South Africa for an example with the load shedding that's going on. And yet there are so many businesses that are so capable of stepping in and step up and come up with the solutions to cut down this frustrating load shedding story. I'd like to open the floor just to give Mr. Dube and Meoki a breather. So what is your take, folks? And those of you that are attending, I know you're not just attending to listen, but you're also attending to make a contribution. Later on, we have a professor who's written a very interesting, a doctor who has written a very interesting paper around the very same topic. We'll allow him later on to weigh in and give us the real high level intellectual property that he has collected from his research. Okay, any takers? Anybody would like to ask a question or make a comment before I go back to my panelists and bring in the next speaker?
Yes.
Yes, sir. When you do so, please introduce yourself and tell us, and then weigh in, please.
Okay, thank you so much. My names are so long, but I'll just say I'm Mr. Africa Ture, Vihi Akasereka Ibrahim from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Can
we see you, Mr. Africa? Just see you, and then we can turn off when you're done.
Yeah, here it's so sunny, but you can have a look at me here.
Yeah, my brother. Thank you, my brother. Okay. You can turn off your camera and carry on there. It will help with the bandwidth. So much. Yes, sir. Welcome, DRC. Okay, Mr. Africa, we're listening. Mr. Ture. Oh, what happened to Mr. Ture? Shame.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yeah, please, okay. Your comment, please.
Yes, as I was saying, the biggest problem is connection, like Mr. Lumumba said, but I would say it starts by education. If you're not ready to eat with your neighbor on the plate who's starving, so you get to grow up with that same system, you won't have a change. So the connection should not only be in the business matters, having one number, but we should also create maybe inter-university, inter-scholar competitions, talking about things, showing others everybody's history. We need to do something like that. We need to know who liberated Nigeria, who liberated South Africa. Like us, it's Mr. Patrick Lumumba, and I've seen Professor Lumumba using his name, so it's a good connection. That's what I think we can say in short. Urge Africans, first of all, to love each other, have intercommunitary activities together. Then people start getting, I think I should do my thing in Zambia. I think I should do my thing in Congo. So instead of Indians and Chinese coming to dominate us, it will be something good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ture is bringing in something very interesting. He says it starts with education. Now we're grooming young people, young leaders who are going to be future leaders. Now, the thing is, when we groom them, we want to bring them into running a country, so they need to be very competitive and versatile and understand things like governance and code of ethics and standards. Now, I'll leave that to the fellow guests to also weigh in this topic, and I'll ask Mr. Dube and Ms. Oki to comment about this later on. Education, that's one of the things that's been brought in, yeah? But most importantly, to teach them about the history so that history does not repeat itself. Any other hand or taker or comment? Are we all good? Okay, I need to mute Ture and Kahisa. Okay, Bab Dube.
Vic,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah,
Miss Oki?
there's a comment in the chat.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. Okay. So we have a comment from Belinda Putti who says the role of business in a country should be to create employment, drive innovation, and skills transfer. Sometimes work with government to fund or help with sports education and developing new markets. A valuable comment, very valuable, and thank you so much, Putti, for this. But before I give this over to my panelists, we know one of the challenges that we have. If the role of business is to do this, there is an element of the people that will be empowered will be the people that have got connections, and the people that will get opportunity to get an opportunity to run these empowerment programs will be people who are connected somehow. But I accept your comment. It's a valid comment. I'll leave it up to my panelists to comment. Right? Any other takers before I hand over to the panelists so that we can continue with our discussion? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Okay, let's get back to Mr. Dube. Mr. Dube, you are a strategic management consultant. You do the turnaround strategies. Certainly, you've been behind the desk, and you're one of those that have been grilled through various executive development programs and MBAs. How far does education go when it comes to real implementation, especially within government? Here is an MBA graduate, but he's in government, he's a politician. How do you make this person effective?
Look, in any position, in any environment, you're given the tools which you need to use to reach an end of what that unit needs you to do. You need to be capable of analyzing the situation, saying this is where the entity is, and this is where the entity would like to be seen to be at. And you need to find then the disjuncture between the two scenarios and say, look, let me then come up with a structure, you perform a form of a gap analysis and come up with what we call strategy. You formulate a strategy and then implement. You need to get a buy-in from the people above you. That will be a board in terms of a corporate environment, and it will be the ministry where the government situation lies. And then you get a buy-in of the people that you'll be asking to implement those strategies. And that's how things then get forward. And then you reach your goal as to where the organization needs to be, putting in place all types of functionality of that type of environment. So education is prime, really. It's of prime importance. You need to know why things are being done in that manner and align with the mission and vision of any environment in which you are. Leadership would drive issues such as the mission and vision, and management gets things done through people. That is, they'll be doing the implementation part, but like I said before, having had the buy-in of where the company needs to be driven to. And Mr. Tore mentioned something about the history. You need to know where you come from and where you want to go to, and I think it's part of the nature of things, where entrepreneurship is lacking behind. I think government as an enablement platform provider should put things in place, because at the end of the day, the government would like to drive government policies such as economic growth, and you need education, you need you need business to drive that sort of the type of a goal for the government, that it will be quite inclusive for the entire people in the country.
All right. Now, thank you so much, Mr. Dube. Before I move over to Ms. Oki, there is a comment from Mutabo P. I just hope this is my president from Limpopo. As she says, on the fact that it starts with education, she agrees, or he agrees. The institution of higher learning, professional bodies, business and schools have to work together to review the curriculum. Now, we can talk about curriculum review until we turn blue. I don't know how many times have we changed our metric, our education system from this to that and from that to that. But the end results is that instead of it getting better, it's getting worse. The passing mark in South Africa is around 33 or 30%, which is not good. So the question is, are we going to produce real leaders that will be able to sustain and be able to live up to the expectations of good corporate governance? Or are we going to create leaders that will be drawn into the politics of the day and become politicians, and then they get deployed and still continue from where the big guns are currently in continuously bringing the country down? So it is a big one. It is a big one. I see Ms. Vuyiswa Mhlongo is looking and checking with much more interest, and I know she is bending wherever she is. Mam Mhlongo, I guess is. What is it that we need to do to reclaim the space and redeem ourselves as a continent that is able to do business, not bogged down by politics and corruption? Please unmute. I know I'm putting you on the spot here. Mamvui is a seasoned public relations practitioner and a lecturer. I will leave you there until you get your buttons right. Meoki, what is your take on this comment that I've just made? Yes, we've got young people we're training. We want to bring them up and plug them into business and to become leaders. Over and above normal training and education, how do we make them to be real, ethical, and do the right thing to assist us as Africa to reclaim our space as a force to be reckoned with? We are a very rich continent. Yeah, we're being looked at as a dark continent, but at the same time, we're not telling our stories. What's your take, ma'am?
We're not, absolutely. Look, I think that comment is spot on. And I'm proud to actually inform you that Botswana is currently hosting one of the biggest, activations globally. I'm sure you know that we are hosting the Forbes Under 30 Africa Summit, which started here. And obviously we have delegates from all over the world, including I think all the countries that are represented here in this call. It's a youth convention, so to speak, with a huge number of speakers from across the world. Yesterday, one of the speakers that we had is actually the youngest billionaire in Africa, Mohamed Dewji, president of TL Group from Tanzania. And, personally, had I not attended the summit yesterday, I would not have known about him. And I think that he was extremely inspirational in his delivery. And I think, we need to tell our stories more. And telling our stories of success more, it's not just at national level. It definitely has to start even internally within organizations. I am very proud of one of the local companies here, being Debswana. Debswana is a 50-50 partnership between the government of Botswana and BS. And it has moved from being a company, it's a world-class mining company. It has moved from being, highly from a complement perspective. Previously, it was managed predominantly by experts. And I think currently its entire executive committee and other leadership across the organization are locals, and they're doing a tremendous job, and they have done for years, for many, many years. And I feel like I always say to my compatriots this side that we're not telling this great Africa success story enough to the world. we limit ourselves. We just go beyond, within the borders of Botswana when we talk about Botswana. We have to talk about these great business successes, so that we showcase to the world, that we are also capable, more than capable, actually. And I think we shouldn't rely on anyone to actually tell these stories on our behalf. We are here. We're the ones who are supposed to be collaborating in order for us to unearth these stories and tell them to the world. We have to force ourselves to be within your BBCs, your CNNs, et cetera, et cetera. We can even create our own solid media platforms in that regard. And I think the biggest word right now is collaboration. Regionally and within the continent, we are still found wanting in that regard. We need to reach out more to each other. And I'm very grateful, Vic, that you have actually reached out to us and put us on this Pan-African conversational platform. And I believe that out of this conversation, hopefully somebody who's listening, can tell that there is this lady from Botswana who can do da-da-da-da-da-da. This is how it begins, and this is how we should be working going forward. And in terms of just the youngsters within organizations, from a cultural perspective, as you said earlier on, it is quite important that they are onboarded properly, and I think it's actually for all employees, including even at the highest level. They need to be inducted, properly, so that they understand the culture. But I think most importantly, we should not be so stuck on hierarchies and protocols within organizations, because even the cleaner, who is one of the lowest people in your organizational hierarchy, can actually be the one coming up with a killer, innovative idea for your organization that can transform your business optimally and sustainably. So we need to promote and accommodate conversations that happen laterally. And we also need to ensure that we create conducive environments within our organizations that will allow for junior officers to even give us as the leaders feedback. The 360-degree feedback approach is very helpful because it also ensures that I learn from everybody that I work with, and I'm not, obstructed by what do they call them? Blind spots that will, just because I'm a leader, it's my way or the highway. We need to embrace different ideas from across the organization. And I think that's one of the problems that we often have, particularly within the government, establishment. There's so much power, and people are so hung up on power that it really takes away a lot of creativity and openness. And at the end of the day, your employee or your employees are and should be your number one priority in your organization. So you have to start from getting brand ambassadorship from your employees before you even look outside. Do your employees understand your vision, your mission, your value proposition, et cetera, et cetera? Make sure that your employees are your number one, ambassadors. That way, it's going to snowball outside and get you even more, positive sentiments from elsewhere. Thank you.
Wow, that's quite a mouthful. Ladies and gentlemen, it's no wonder why Botswana is regarded as one of the best performing countries. And before I go back to Mr. Dube, we have a doctor in our midst who is going to share his insights on the paper that is written about this topic in particular. But before I do that, allow me to read a comment from Emang Bukutlo from Botswana. It's very difficult to say it's a he or she. Okay, the comment is, character shapes personality, and character is built by what we model as parents at home, not just at school. So I'll pause that it starts strong. It starts in strong families. In Botswana, we are a strong female-headed households, and I'll venture to say that our children are drawn towards social sciences because of following in the mother's footsteps. We need our men and women to take up their responsibilities to build a strong nation before we can even talk about the syllabus. Yep, yeah, take it that. Very important. Now, it's our responsibility as well as parents to start shaping our children's future, those that want to go into business and to go into politics, to make them understand that in both areas, governance is required, good conduct is required, and ethical conduct is required. Now, Mr. Dube, before I open for the professor to the doctor to weigh in, one of the key things in the topic is about perceptions. We are perceived negatively as a country, and we also tend to be hit by this ratings company. What is it that we need to do over and above just looking at the ratings as a country from the business perspective to be able to position ourselves as a country favorably and earn the respect that we deserve? Babdub.
Wow. Look, I'm so glad that Ms. Oki spoke about collaboration and also the Botswana example, because with collaboration, the collaboration starts with like minds, and you then do in terms of what the extent of the scope of work is. Now, with perceptions, and you mentioned the rating companies, no? It's high time that we, for lack of better words, that those that are staying behind should get their houses in order. We need to, when we collaborate, there are issues such as the international trade agreements when it comes to multinational entities. You need to deal with issues such as cultural dynamics and all those type of things. But with perception, going back to perceptions, in a typical business environment, you would have 4 scenarios, and I'll go through the 4 of them individually. You would have these entities that are performing well, and then you'll have these entities that are underperforming, and then you'll have thirdly, entities that are facing a financial distress, and lastly, those that are in a financial crisis. So we need to have our companies, our businesses performing well at all times, to tick all the blocks. Now, when I'm talking about a company that's performing well, it will have an established cash availability. It will have a good sales demand and market share. But then you don't stop. If your market share is 30%, as I said earlier on, business is all about growth. You need to venture into other markets and continue growing and growing. Now, if a company is underperforming in our second scenario, this company should be experiencing still a fair sales demand, but then a low cash availability. What needs to happen with that is that a turnaround or restructuring needs to happen to bring it back to where it needs to be. And then on the third scenario, you find the businesses that are in business rescue, in financial distress. Those are the ones that need a business rescue to take them back to the profitability level. Lastly, that's where you don't need to be. You don't wish to be at that level. The companies that are experiencing financial crisis face what we call liquidation. So perceptions. We would be judged by performances of our governments, performances of our corporate companies, and then we'll be knocked out of crucial issues that the global world out there enjoy, and will always be excluded in many things. Your government SOEs, for instance, will have to get post-commencement finance facilitations in order to stay afloat, which is what your IMFs and other FDIs do not look pretty with regard to looking at countries in Africa. So we'll always be criticized, we'll always be scrutinized in such measures as how we conduct our businesses globally and at all levels of government and also in the private sector. That's the problem with perceptions, and they set their rules, and we get subjected to perceptions, and the rating companies then take their decisions on excluding us or rather or else embracing us.
All right, thank you so much. I think you've covered quite a mouthful. Yeah. Perceptions, I always also refer to perceptions as one of those things we say. Perceptions are like what we would normally say, one man's meat is another man's poison, because how you perceive me may be perceived differently by someone else. So that is very, very important for us to be very mindful of, because most of the time you would pick up that these rating companies or organizations sometimes sound very biased. They will do this in order just to make us feel bad as a country or as any country. But at the same time, them doing what is best for them to control who we are and what we're doing. And I had a very interesting conversation with someone when I was traveling over the past 2 weeks. And one of the topics was that we must never worry about the dollar, because who controls the dollar? What is the dollar? If we're to sit down and really analyze the value of the dollar and in our rand, it's something that will shock the world. Now, the question is, where is the respect that we need? Do we need it from the West, or do we need it from the East, or do we need it from the Middle East, where things are happening? Right. I would like to call upon the doctor that has written a paper on the subject. I wouldn't like to mess up calling his name. The one respect to give to a person is by pronouncing their name and surname correctly. My good doctor, I really would like you to just briefly introduce yourself and just give us your overall view or perspective on this matter. Dr. Moka. He was in. I don't know what happened right now. Let me just check. Okay. While we're getting the doctor to join us and weigh in on this topic, is there anyone who would like to make a comment or ask a question? Because we don't want to be the only ones that are doing the talking. It's all of us. It's of all us. We want you to be part of this conversation. You can raise a hand, or you can just, holler me and introduce yourself.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, as I see no one is ready to talk, I would just like to give examples for what I was saying out there.
Yeah, from the DRC. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, you see, I will give an example with children. I used to do something because I studied in Kenya with my friends. We used to contribute some small monies, and then at the end of the year we will do a party, and it will be a very big party. But you see, with children like this who are ready to contribute together, but they're lacking just someone to show them the way. Instead of doing this, you could buy this and do things going on forward. So when I was talking about education, I was talking about these types of things, putting children together, or maybe in the school fees, putting something. For example, you get a school with, I guess you're hearing me.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Okay, we have a school with 100 pupils, and they pay $1,000 per month. In the 10 months, we have $1 million. Then we have the 100 tutors of these 100 children thinking out together and say, maybe some of us will have some instability and we lack the chance to read we lack the chance to pay school fees for our children here. So why not put $1,000 for the first month together, and we have a $1 million, and we're going to invest so that our children will have a uniformized education up to the end of time. These are things that can change their mind. When children come to hear that this is what their parents did, exactly that's what they're gonna do, or they're gonna do it best. So let's take it to the chance to the level that things have changed and these children have become grown-up people. And one of them is the president, or I don't know what, Minister of Economy and something like that. He remembers that. What he's gonna do when his South African brother is going to come with an industry that there's a big bang out there in the United States or whatever, comes to, or at the same time, what is he gonna do? He's gonna use patience for the South African, and he's going to tell the American man, wait, we have somebody doing that.
All right.
But if we don't do that, it's not gonna be the case.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Africa. It seems like the education is a key thing that we need to go back to basics and start grooming future leaders that will make South Africa to earn the respect that it deserves. I'd like to share a comment shared by a very special sister of mine, Linda Lwasikolo, who says private-public partnerships where skills transfer will add a lot of value in assisting and guiding government departments in achieving the desired outcomes. So the triple Ps, private public partnerships, I think these will assist in dissolving the tensions, and that government is government. But if business comes in, that's where business comes in as private sector. Okay. Any other comment? Thank you, Lindelwa. Okay, and then another comment from Ikram. Ikram says the governments in our beloved Africa are the enablers for business to thrive and to assist in growing economics. Very interesting. Now, this is the other way around. The governments in our beloved Africa are the enablers for business to thrive and to assist in growing economies. The question that I can pose based on these comments would be, yes, we do see government going out on state visits, and when the president is going out to visit other countries, he will take a delegation of businessmen. But those businessmen, most of them, if not all of them, are the cronies, are the buddies. And then they get business, the business will be to them, and it will also, the money and the benefits will circulate among the politicians. But I hold that thought to myself. I'll give it to my colleagues to weigh in on that while we wait for Mr. Tsepo Matsiba, who we all know, who will be just wrapping this up. And from the reputation perspective, how are we managing our reputations within our countries? Okay, Babet Dube. Private-public partnerships. What's your take? Probably trying to unmute.
Hey, apologies. You touched on a very crucial issue here of public-private partnerships, right?
Yes, sir.
But how and why it fails. You mentioned corruption issues, and because the causes thereof, the causes of corruption that mars these beautiful initiatives. When you have low press freedom, when you have low economic freedom, when you have gender inequality, poverty, and also political instability, it goes on to weaken property rights, and we're coming back to low levels of education. Unfortunately, historically, not all of us have come through the basic requirements of getting to grips with the situation and circumstances around us. So then issues such as corruption then creep in. And how does it affect the government? There comes an erosion of trust to work in the best interest of the public. And then you will have waste of rates and taxes that are meant to advance community projects. Then you get this poor quality of infrastructure and services. Né? But then, why do we need to stop corruption? Injustices through advantages some of the expenses at the expense of others. You mentioned chronism. This is what it's talked about here. Inefficiencies in operations. People with lack of vision, people with lack of expertise are put in positions, and we end up with inefficiencies in operations. And it also comes to what we call reputational damage, which makes it difficult to sustain quality staff retention. You'll get all these able people in the market out there, but you cannot retain them in government positions because of they coming up with systems, and they battle to implement those systems because they meant to fail. They meant to favor people that do not have the right skills. And then you also have to a failure to obtain the best value in tender processes. We have this tender system, and you don't get a good value out of those things. I think in your script, you also have the SWOT analysis. It identifies for instance, the region's competitive advantages with its indigenous assets. The example here would be Sri Lanka with its tea, and other regions in Africa with cocoa and all those type of things. And that will be pitted against internal or external factors that keep a region from realizing its potential. So those are things that really marginalize the very aim, the very purpose of a public-private partnerships in that.
Okay. No, thank you so much. Mayor Oki, what is your take on the comments that have been made thus far?
Thank you so much. I mean, I think I just want to, just also in the interest of time, perhaps just give, credit. We need to give credit where it's due. And I know that in trying to also contribute to cost savings, etc., which obviously, at the end of the day, I think the bottom line is transforming the lives of the people of Africa. And that's where that's really where all of these conversations are going to. And I think last year or year before, His Excellency Hakainde, the Zambian president, he is one of the first presidents who immediately said, when I travel to these international conventions, first of all, I'm going to cut off the number of public officers that I travel with, and also we're going to be flying economy. And I think we've also seen even our president here in Botswana, His Excellency Masisi, also emulated that. And I think at the end of the day, we need to look at the bottom line. What is the bottom line? The bottom line is Africa has great potential. And when we say Africa has great potential, we say there are many, many great opportunities through which we can harness to ensure that livelihoods in our respective countries are transformed positively and sustainably. And I think we need to, individually and collectively start harnessing these opportunities, that have to do with cost saving, doing business better, luring, investors differently, exporting our talent, exporting our goods and services, to other continents, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to highlight that, for me, these are not even small in terms of just for presidents to take deliberate decisions to say in the interest of cost saving, so that obviously that money can then be diverted elsewhere. Because I do concur with the previous speaker when he said, at the end of the day, perhaps there are perceptions that when government officials travel globally, under the the pretext that they're traveling for the country, they are actually traveling for their personal gains. I think in these other instances, we do see that, reducing travel, entourages, et cetera, all of that money can be used to build schools and to, to build more hospitals and to get more medicines, et cetera. So we need to also hold our leaders accountable at any given time to ensure that there is no wastage at all.
Thank you. Okay, I've been trying to find my mouse pointer to ensure that it's sitting at the right place so that I can unmute. Now, with all what we've discussed, vision is important, the expertise are required, and some countries are doing the right thing. They want to have their lean and mean structure. Size matters, compared to other countries where you've got a massive size government. You've got hundreds of cars, expensive cars and fleet, and whereas in business, everybody has to be held accountable for whatever they spend money on. Now, the country's image affects the brand, and the affected brand would normally lead to a bad reputation. So how much cleaning is required for us to get African continent and its various countries to perform well and be perceived well by the international community? Sometimes it's easy for us, and sometimes I feel like that. You can say, well, they can say what they want. Talk is cheap, and talk does not bother us. But as a country, our African countries, how are our African countries positioned in terms of reputation? I'll make an example for an example. Yeah, it's been a long day. Nigeria, problem. Wherever you go, wherever you hear people talk about Nigeria, they will always paint it red. South Africa, somehow we are now leading, one of the capitals of crime. DRC, they have got its own issues. Kenya, you're not very safe there because, this whole Islamic thing and Americans and the fighting. So when you look at the average countries that seem to be performing well, I mean, amongst these, I would like to bring Rwanda, which has just made a turnaround and doing extremely well. How much reputational work do we need to do to position ourselves as a continent? I'll leave this open between the two of you, and then I can also throw the same question to the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. And I think I'll go back to the point I made earlier in terms of internal brand ambassadorship. And of course, in this case, linking it now to citizens. You cannot your brand as a country cannot and can never be looked at positively if your people are not happy. And I think we continue to see a lot of and hear a lot of concerns around leadership in Africa, as you outlined. I mean, Botswana is no exception. One of the I think recent, or rather in previous years, the Global Happiness Index report, notwithstanding the great things you've been saying about Botswana, the Global Happiness Index report actually says that we are one of the least happiest societies in the world. So and I said, no matter how hard you look, you cannot divorce the two. It is important for the citizen value proposition to be outlined very clearly. Leaders must first start looking into transforming and improving the lives of our people, because we have just come out of a budget, the annual budget reading by the Minister of Finance. It was actually a couple of months ago. And year in, year out, there's great concern from the citizenry that money is being returned to the government coffers. Lots of money is being returned to the government coffers. On the flip side of the coin, we have people who still don't have the basics. So implementation is a huge problem. And we need to hold all employees, especially of government, because we need to hold them accountable through having proper performance monitoring processes that will indicate if one is not performing, how can they be assisted? You have an obligation as an employer to support that person before you manage them out. So how are we going to address issues of performance and implementation? Because these are the things that are dragging us behind. There are many, many issues across the African continent. As you said, there's perceptions about corruption. And I know in South Africa recently, or in previous years, we saw a lot of issues around, South Africa alleged, I don't know if to say alleged, but we saw in the news at least that South Africa, some of the South African citizens were actually, beating other citizens from other African countries. We need to unite. We need to come together. But how do we avoid people moving out of my country into your country illegally? First, we need to make sure that we provide all the necessary elements of making a person comfortable about living. Because at the end of the day, it's not everybody who has gone to school. It's not everybody who has a job to go to every morning, but government has to make some strive to reach to that person. I think government, together with the business community, we need to join hands in ensuring that, whether it's the MDGs or the SDGs or our respective country strategies, insofar as livelihoods are concerned, are met.
All right.
So yeah, I think for me that's really the key.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Meoki. There's often say leave the best for last. I don't know, this participant chose to be the last, and let's hope it will be the best. Payana, well, what happened now? Did you withdraw? There was a hand by Payana Makwatana.
Good afternoon,
afternoon.
Chair, and good afternoon to everybody. Yeah, no, it was a deliberate action for the hands to go down, as I've seen that you have recognized me. Chair, I think the presentation today is very fruitful. And I actually want to just bring upon only two things that I think they center around many presenters. Regardless of which country it might be. However, I can simply say South Africa is seeming to be the epicenter of many things, especially when it comes to crime. It is included, though not tested, but to my analysis, within the top 10, if one can say it in that way. But being as it may, the good policies that we can present or we're presenting about, regardless of how and where the platform might be, will remain. Believe you me, will remain, and it will always be the source of reference upon which one wants to showcase the reality as to how things were supposed to be done. But the challenge that we have as the continent, as the countries in different perspectives of the world, within Africa per se, it is corruption. Believe you me, for as long as we don't have a specific tool that can be used to dim down corruption, we will never, under any circumstance, have a better Africa. If you look into the multitudes of countries within the continent, we are all crying the same outcry. This, to me, it populates nothing but a center for research, and a research that basically will come up with something that interlink within different countries' policies. We're talking the good policies in many countries. You can look. If you look at Zimbabwe, they have got their own policies. The country is rich. If you look here in South Africa, the country is rich, and the fellow rest countries. But for the fact that we have got one enemy that comes in multiple names, there's a narration that they use nowadays. The narration says Kamina Kawena, meaning that I do it for you, you will do it for me in return. You do something for somebody here, And then that somebody will not do it directly to you, will do it somewhere, somehow. Let's say, for instance, is a typical kind of an example, which is very painful. I am an employee in government. I'm occupying the position, the authoritative position in HR. I'm the one who's responsible for appointment and recruitment of personnel. And then there you bring upon your own child or your sister, and you say, no, put this sister of mine in your department. And you're working in a different department within the same administration of government. And I said, no, for the fact that I'm doing this to you, please also put upon my sister in your own department or in another department where you can have an influence. This is basically, if not typically, what is killing the continent, and it is killing different state departments. Believe you me, the lake is already overlapped to the private sector. So as you can look, particularly in South Africa and the rest of the country, if you can look, there is no way in which we can continue and want to indulge in building policies while there's a problem. I guess to believe, and I strongly suggest that let we have the medicine that will treat this ailment that we experience almost every day. Remember, corruption is not something that happens almost every day. It's something that happens almost every second. When you look into things like, you know, markets, there are a lot of things that basically we are worried about. When you look into government, a lot of things that we're worried about. Private sector in generic, a lot of things that we're worried about. Therefore, we need to center around the issue of accountability, especially to enforce it. I can rest assure you, if we can definitely, being as we are, more of the fact that we're willing to build Africa, if we can really come up with the medicine of how to kill and cure the primary healthcare that we can then be able to apply to remedize corruption before it can even emerge, definitely I can rest assure you that we'll build a better continent. Right now, we are talking about the markets. And with these markets that we're talking about, if you go there and look into the companies that are even deployed there, perhaps in South Africa, looking into the so-called department called to SMME, you will simply see that only 2 companies are centering around the issue of procurement issues. So over and above, when they go and make a presentation in terms of community development, and then, you know, and all those kinds of development that they bring upon within the country, they speak the good English as if they're building up countries. Let me just calm down and re-look into ourselves, do a better introspection, because I don't think all of us are corrupt. We know the kind of administration that we have. We know the kind of leadership that we have. Let we have a better research or a better kind of an investigation that will outroot, through the investigation, outroot the corruption. I think, Chair, if really I can rest assure you, you can go to all spheres of administration, all spheres in government in all different countries. The only illness that delays prosperity of government administration and private institution is corruption. It hardens me for the fact that we know, all of us, that indeed we can prosper, indeed we can build countries, indeed we can build governments. But unfortunately, due to these corruptions, it is leading even people to migrate illegally or legally. And we start fighting as Africans. It constitutes and portrays different image. And for the fact that we don't even look things introspectively, we end up fighting ourselves.
Yeah.
Let me go back and re-look into this thing. This thing is political. This thing is administrative. This thing is business related. This thing is, private generic, and all those kind of English language that one can still want to articulate. For the fact that we don't get the remedy to remedize the situation, it's as much as the plans, the policies, the ideas, the provision of different acts in different countries will come to a peak. So let's just come up and look for a specific with specific narration or investigation that will deal and supersede the rest. If really we can have a sort of a punitive, I'm saying it from both legal and administrative perspective. If we can just have a punitive kind of an investigative report that can somehow be sold upon in different countries through different channels of administration in different governments, believe you me, we'll then be able to have a better tool to deter people from creating corruptions and this kind of maladministrations.
Yeah, that is
That's
my
what
good doctor, ladies and gentlemen. I think I was right. You leave the best for last. All I can say is that the mind boggles. Thank you, Mr. Makotana. I really look forward to having you in more of these conversations, but I look forward to having you speak at our national summit. When I started, I said these monthly webinars culminate into a week-long summit, which this year we're hoping to host it in Lusaka. So I'll definitely make sure that I keep your contacts and you become part of our panelists during the main summit. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our program. I know time is never enough. We've allocated 1 hour, 30 minutes. When we started, we were running for only an hour. There was a request to stay a little bit more. So we've made it an hour and a half. So for next month, these happen every last Tuesday of the month. For next month, ladies and gentlemen, another thorny topic. We're talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area. What is it and who is part of it? And how do you get involved? And what are the benefits? Again, I'm certain that a lot of people will want to get involved, but some of them will be turned off by the element of corruption as to who do you know in order to get things done. And Mr. Makotana talks about Egamina Gawena. In one of the provinces in South Africa, when you get a tender or you're about to get business from them, they say they want streetwise too. And you know what that means? In Africa, we refer to that as the brown envelope. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. There's been a lot of other comments and on the comment line on the topic, but one that stands out, which just sums up what Dr. Makotana has said, is that from Ms. Letty Butlole, I hope I pronounced it right, and the comment, her comment is that on the topic of private-public partnerships, corruption is really a problem. Sadly, because it continues to widen the poverty margins across the rich, that is the benefactor who most of the time has an unfair advantage, and poor, that's the ordinary nationals who don't have corrupt connections. There was another comment from Obakeng Buzwana who says, please keep our contacts too. Obakeng, I've got your email address. I'll certainly keep you informed. Then there's a comment from Africa, says, Mr. President, tell Professor Pierre Lumumba that I would love to put him in contact with Mr. Ronald Lumumba. It's fine. I've got an email. We'll talk about that. From me to you, with love and all, thank you so much to everyone who has made time to be part of this conversation. I can also see all my buddies and friends from Facebook and from all over the country and all over the continent. Thank you so much. Have a pleasant Tuesday afternoon. See you on the 30th of May when we talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area. What is it? And how can we become part of that? How can we benefit from that? We need to know more about the continent and how we can grow as a people. From me to you, with love and all, on behalf of the Africa Brand Summit and Mr. Soli Muweng, we thank you. It's been a great pleasure having you. You can hang around and say hi to others, but the meeting is declared closed. Much love. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.